Daniel Faalele got national attention for his performance in the Ravens' Week 14 loss to the Steelers, but not in a good way. And Shannon Sharpe cooked him. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on Locked On Ravens, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day here on the Locked On Podcast Network is now the #1 sports podcast network. Thanks so much to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage, and we have a jam-packed episode today. In the first part of the show, man, did Daniel Faalele get cooked by Shannon Sharpe. It was a 15-plus minute rant from Shannon Sharpe on his show with Chad Johnson, Nightcap, and I've never seen a player get cooked like this before. It was wild. We'll talk about what he had to say in the first part of the show, talk about Faalele a little more and the offensive line and whatnot. Then in the second part of the show, the NFL admitted a major mistake that they made that impacted the Ravens in a negative way. One of those calls was not the correct one, so we'll talk about that in the second part of the show. And finally, we'll do some more Ravens and Steelers analysis. We have a couple of other pieces of news for the Ravens to talk about. And also, in the second segment, I'll re-announce the announcement we announced yesterday. We'll do it for the rest of the week. Very exciting stuff here, so be sure you stay tuned for that as well. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. All right, Daniel Faalele. It seems like at this point we talk about him so much. Honestly, to me, it feels like we're just screaming into the void about this thing because honestly, it doesn't feel like any. I mean, we're 4 games away from the season being over for the Ravens, and whether they make the playoffs or not, who knows? But we've been talking about it forever. Nothing has changed. And his performance against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 14 got national attention for multiple different reasons. Yesterday, we talked a lot about the sideline interaction that he and Lamar Jackson had, and that being kind of exposed and put out there. And that got attention in its own right. But, you know, we saw multiple viral plays of Daniel Faalele where he's being knocked over or he's missing blocks, getting out leveraged by cornerbacks. Like, it was bad, horrible all the way around. And Shannon Sharpe on Nightcap that he has with Chad Johnson went on an absolute rant, like 15 plus minutes of talking about Daniel Faalele and this Ravens team in this way. And there were so many quotes that he had in this. I've literally never seen something like this before. It might have happened before, but I've never seen something like this before. So we'll just start with one. He said, quote, "You shouldn't be allowed to be that big and that sorry. He can't block the sun out of his eyes, let alone a defensive lineman or a blitzer coming. Filet, fish fillet," because they're talking about Daniel Faalele, I guess, play on words with the name. But it was unbelievable. Like, absolute, like just all across the board, like one after another after another. There was another one. He said, "As bad as he's been playing this entire season, how bad must his backup be? If the backup is that bad, he ain't even a high school player," which we've been talking about on the show of like, honestly, like, I agree with this. Like, what do the Ravens see in practice that we don't see with Daniel Faalele, that with everything he's had this season and all the poor plays he's had that have outweighed the good ones? Like, is Emory Jones really that bad? You know, Ben Cleveland, who we will talk about, who's no longer an option for the next 3 weeks, is he really that bad? You know, like, and again, part of it is on roster construction. Like, I don't think Eric DeCosta, we've talked about it, he didn't do a good job with the guard position this offseason, but man, you got to try something. Shannon Sharpe said he's as big as he is sorry. He said, "I know damn well ain't nobody ever told him this year, good game. They lied if they did. Everybody know when they play like some stir fry." He said, "He hurt me. I'm frustrated and I haven't gotten hit in 20 years. He said, "This is why I couldn't coach." Shannon Sharpe also said, "If he's the solution, what's the problem? If he's the answer, what's the question? It's hard for me to believe that there are linemen worse than what he is. I refuse to believe that." Another one, so you got to be as gracious in defeat as you are in victory. And this is in response to Kyle Goon, who put out a tweet about how there was the pool of reporters was essentially standing outside of Daniel Faalele's locker, and essentially Daniel Faalele looked at the reporters and nodded, and then kind of walked off and didn't return for questions, because generally the policy, Kyle noted, is you're not supposed to talk to the players before they're fully dressed. And since Daniel Faalele was shirtless, he just kind of took his shirt in his hand, nodded to the reporters, and then walked off, like I just mentioned there. So, that was, people are saying that was a pretty terrible look for Faalele. And so in response to that, Shannon Sharpe said, "You got to be as gracious in defeat as you are in victory. Short of him saying, 'I suck today,' I ain't want to hear nothing he have to say. You got to talk in defeat just like you would in victory. That's what makes us pros. We don't hide, we don't run, we don't tuck our tails when things don't go our way." And I've been very critical of, a lot of players who have done this for the Ravens this season. Roquan Smith has done it. I believe Marlon Humphrey has done it. Zay Flowers did it. There have been a few others, veterans leaving the locker room and kind of leaving it to the rookies. And so, players, I've never had to do media before, as a player, because guess what? I didn't play sports professionally. I do not have that background. Q could maybe talk about this. Kajer Ismail, we have him on a bunch, and I'll actually ask Q about this when we have him on this week. But, I've never done a professional football media scrum like that as a player. And, I'm sure after a loss, you probably don't want to be talking about it, especially if you had a bad game. But it's kind of what you sign up for. And, there are a bunch of conversations about should they not, in terms of what the policy should be. But the policies are what they are right now. And, if all these other guys have to step up and speak to the media when they're, when they have media at their locker or whatnot, you can decline to speak to, I guess you can do that. But, when other guys are stepping up and meeting the moment and you're not, and you are one of the reasons I think why you lost, then it becomes it's just, I'm not going to give him or anybody a pass for doing that, when it felt like he could have just put the shirt on and spoke to the reporters. Because look, I've been harsh on guys like Roquan and Zay and others as well. So I'm not going to give Daniel Faalele a pass for it either. But Shannon Sharpe, man, he did Daniel Faalele dirty on some of these quotes, man. He said fish fillet. That's crazy. I'm not gonna lie, that's crazy. And then actually there was another one, because people are talking about how the one that actually is getting the most attention right now is that he said, Shannon Sharpe said Daniel Faalele can't block the sun out of his eyes, let alone another player, which is wild. This is unbelievable. Because look, there's one thing about evaluating performance. His performance hasn't been great for most of the season. He's had fine moments at times, but that's all overshadowed by the loud losses he's had over the course of the year. And that is absolutely crazy. That he can't block the sun out of his eyes thing as well. That's the one that I'm just dang, that's cold, man. That's cold. But it's unfortunate that, he's even in this situation 14 weeks into the season. And I talked about this on yesterday's show, where I think that, yes, Eric DeCosta deserves blame for how the guard position looks. Obviously, Faalele himself deserves blame for the execution part of it. But right now, I believe that this is on John Harbaugh and the coaching staff. And that's what I talked about yesterday. I said that, the fact that they're continuing to trot him out there to put him in position to make those mistakes. And yeah, you know what? The backups might be worse, but you got to try it, because this clearly is not working. And the only thing you have done, any semblance of trying to make a move on this offensive line, which again is not only on Daniel Faalele. I want to make that clear. Daniel Faalele, again, as I mentioned, has been the one that's kind of the poster child for how this offensive line has looked this season, which is not good. But all five of those guys have a part to play in how poor this line has looked this year. But the only semblance of change we've seen is a rotation for one game with Emory Jones and Andrew Voorhees. And Voorhees hasn't been good either. But you look at the pass block grades from this game. We talked about these yesterday. Pass block and run block. Daniel Faalele was the worst offensive lineman on the roster who played. Pass pro wise, Faalele ended up putting up a 39.4 pass block grade, which, as I mentioned, was the worst on the team offensive line wise. The only player that was worse than him was Shashin Ali at 33.5. Then the next closest offensive lineman of Faalele at 39.4 was Tyler Linderbaum at 55.6. Then you have Andrew Voorhees at 68, Roger Rosengarten 69.3, And Ronnie Stanley had a good game in pass protection. He was up at 82.9. And then run blocking wise, still Faalele worst on the team, where at least offensive line wise, Daniel Faalele 54.2, Inji Voorhees 62.3, Ronnie Stanley 63.1, Linderbaum 67.2, Roger Rosengarten 72.8. So again, it's just like it feels like we're just screaming into nothingness here about, everybody sees it except for the team. And, this now has become like a national thing where the Ravens game is getting a lot of national attention for other reasons. We'll talk about, the ref stuff and the calls and the mistake the NFL made in the second part of the show. But like Faalele is getting like the most attention he's ever got. And I think over the last 4 weeks, it's probably only going to get worse, especially if they continue to trot him out there. So Shannon Sharpe let his thoughts be known. And he made it clear that he does not think Daniel Faalele should be playing for this team. And yeah, I mean, look, I think we're all in agreement with that. At least most of us are in agreement with that. And even because this was the 2000 Ravens reunion thing, and Shannon Sharpe said, he said if he was there, he'd go out on the field and say, you terrible. Like all that. It went on and on and on and on. We're usually, if a guy goes on a rant about a player, especially like in the national media or even just, in general, you're like, all right, you maybe talk about it for 3, 4, 5 minutes max. And then you kind of like move on, maybe the conversation lasts for like 15 minutes and it goes off in different directions. This was just a roast session. This was like if they had a roast for Daniel Faalele, this is what that was. But, it's unfortunate because like, coming out of the draft, I was high on Daniel Faalele. I liked the pick at the time, but I liked him as a tackle. I didn't really understand them moving him inside to guard. And, he was very mumuch a raw player coming out of Minnesota and needed multiple years to develop, in my opinion. And they just kind of threw him into the fire at this new position. And, it just wasn't the right decision. And the fact that they've continued to do this now for what's going to be 2 seasons feels like 2 seasons wasted for this Ravens team for different reasons. And while Faalele isn't the only reason this team is losing, far from it, I think he and this offensive line has been the most consistent reason why this offense has struggled at times this year. Coming up with the second part of the show, we'll talk about the NFL minigame major mistake that happened against the Ravens in their Week 14 game against the Steelers. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the moment flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked in every snap, every drive, every possibility. And for that Ravens and Steelers game, maybe you had Isaiah Likely anytime touchdown, the one, because obviously the second one did not get called in the Ravens' favor. Maybe if you're on the Steelers side of things, Jaylen Warren anytime touchdown. He scored one on a botch coverage by the Ravens. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here with you on this Tuesday edition of the show. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Again, we have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. So Monday through Friday, we have our regular show here at 6 a.m. Eastern time. But we also have bonus episodes on the weekends when there are headlines. We have Locked On Ravens watch-alongs during games, instant reactions after games, and after every piece of Ravens big news, the squad show with myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Qadri Ismail. And we also made an announcement yesterday. I'm going to re-announce it here. We added in, it's a network-wide initiative. The Everydayer Club is officially live. Essentially, this is add-on content. So nothing's changing with the regular show. Everything still is going to remain the same. You still get all this content for free. The regular show, squad show, watch-alongs, bonus episodes, instant reactions, all that. All that's going to stay free. Essentially, what this is the stuff that I haven't been able to do anymore because of how busy the show has gotten and all the stuff we have to cover and do. We're bringing that back. So we have text chain with me. It's one-on-one personal text chain with me. You can interact with me there about the Ravens. We're going to do weekly Q&As during the draft. We're going to read off every single mock draft there, and we'll still read off mock drafts here. And we're going to continue to scale this thing up. So there are a couple of different tiers that you can choose from. If you want to do the first one, you get access to ad-free audio episodes. You get everyday Discord server, national bonus shows. If you want to do the second tier, you also get access to the extra stuff, again, that I just don't have time to put in the show on a weekly basis. So the Q&As and other stuff that we're going to do. Also, as well, I mentioned the subtext, the one-on-one text chain with me, which I'll be doing every single day, as well as newsletters for the show every day as well, and other discounts on merch from Locked On Merch Store, members only Locked On Merch Store. So people have asked me if there's another way that they can support the show, because, we don't do YouTube memberships or, super chats or anything like that. And they said, is there a way we can support you? So if you want to support the show, support the channel even more, you can head over and see if that's for you. If not, well, that's all right, because nothing's changing. We're still doing everything here that we're doing, still 5 days a week, free and available everywhere on Locked On Ravens, and plus more of that free coverage and content. So let's dive into this. The NFL, they admitted they made a mistake, one of those calls, and yeah, surprise, surprise, right? So John Harbaugh talked to reporters on Monday, and one of the things he actually was told he was allowed to share is that the NFL admitted they got the unnecessary roughness penalty on Travis Jones, where they called him, like running into the long snapper or whatnot, that unnecessary roughness penalty. They said they got that wrong, and that ended up costing the Ravens 4 points, because essentially it was a Chris Boswell field goal that was made, and then, they get the first down off the unnecessary roughness penalty, and the next play, Pittsburgh scores a touchdown. 4 points in a 5-point loss is pretty important, especially when, the Ravens had an opportunity to probably drive down the field and kick a field goal instead of having to go for a touchdown at the end of that game. So, look, so I guess we have to, the NFL give the Ravens a win then, right? Just put a little win in the Ravens column and move on, and there you go. That's what we're going to do here. No, obviously not. But that's what this is, right? It's so annoying to hear that, yeah, after the fact, a day later, yeah, sorry, we got it wrong, whoops, but you still lost because of that. And a lot of and again, I'm not going to sit here and say that the refs were the only reason the Ravens lost this game. Again, they shouldn't have had it come down to that point. They should have played better in a lot of these situations over the course of the game, especially earlier. But it's also unfair to say that the refs didn't have any influence on this game, because that's just not true. 3 huge calls in this game, with obviously the Isaiah Likely one taking the cake. And I am curious to see, or, I guess we're not going to. I'm not sure if the NFL will give Harbaugh permission to talk about everything, but I'm curious to know what, their official diagnosis is. I know Harbaugh did talk to reporters about those plays as well, or, at least the likely touchdown, but essentially they're just going with the 3-step rule with that, which they're not calling it that, but what else do you want to call it? Where why do we need 3 feet in the end zone now? Why? And actually, I saw someone make a really interesting point. This if that ball wasn't caught in the end zone, it would have been ruled a catch and a fumble, because he's already in the motion of making that 3rd step. And he actually said that John Harbaugh said that he was not fine with how he caught the ball, Isaiah Likely. And I came on here and said that I didn't blame Isaiah Likely for that. Apparently, the Ravens were not happy with how Isaiah Likely caught that football. But, even still, he said that he is not comfortable with, clarification on that Isaiah Likely call, because he said it's about as clear as mud right now. About when he was asked a question about, are you okay, comfortable with the call there after watching it? Do you feel there needs to be more clarification? And I just, Harbaugh was asked about it a lot, and he said that they had a conversation with the league office, and said they were gracious enough to spend a lot of time on the phone with everybody. And he said it didn't clear anything up. He said it didn't make it any easier to understand on 1 or 2 of the calls, and they're very hard to understand how they get overturned. And that's the thing too, of actually overturning them, where we saw on the Zay Flowers catch, yeah, that call's good, everything, but then you call these calls certain ways, and then I know you're going to call things touchdowns to review them, going to call turnovers to review them, with the Aaron Rodgers play. But it was just like massive play after massive play after massive play. And again, like if you're the Ravens, don't let it get to that point where those massive calls determine the outcome of the game. But, when you score a touchdown, you're supposed to get 6 points, not have it be called incomplete and completely change the complexion of what the game is. And again, like if Rashod Bateman catches the ball and, runs with it for a first down or a touchdown, maybe we're talking about a different story. And we're kind of looking back on that like, man, that was a bad call, but oh well, because they won the game. But we're looking back on these calls now is, yeah, they admitted one mistake and seems like, at least for this likely play, they're pretty set in stone on that. And maybe that's because they just like can't like backtrack on it because they know how bad of a look it would be. But one thing that was made actually, and this came from David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. David is awesome and does really good work. He actually quote tweeted the tweet from Gene Steratore, who, works for CBS now as the rules analyst, was a former NFL ref. And essentially what Gene said was, he played the highlight of the touchdown and said, to have completed the pass, the receiver must secure control of the ball, have both feet or a body part other than the hands in bounds, and then perform a football move such as take a third step, tuck the ball away, turn upfield, avoid, ward off an opponent, or maintain control of the ball long enough to do so, which he said Isaiah likely didn't do. So what David Harrison did is he looked at that, and essentially where Gene Steratore got this was from the NFL rulebook, and Gene Steratore admitted that in the rulebook it says extend the ball forward is part of that last order of operations. But Gene didn't put that in his tweet. He put everything else in there, the additional step, tuck the ball away, turn upfield. He essentially took out the extend the ball forward part. So, we can put on the tinfoil hats and do all the conspiracies about what's going on here, really. But it's unbelievable. And, I had I saw on social media, multiple big time Steelers accounts put out like, man, great win, but the Ravens really got screwed, or man, that's crazy. And even still, like, it's going to be a massive conversation, obviously, I think for the rest of the week, as well as the rest of the season, depending on how it goes. And, even when you look at these two teams, like even if the Ravens won this game and we're going to move on or whatnot, or even, depending on the outcome of the game, I don't think that to me, this game showed that neither team's probably going very far, but at least give the team that, is making these plays the reward for the plays, which is points or the ball back or, just a kickoff on that Travis Jones thing, because those 4 points were a massive swing. So like, yay for the NFL for admitting it, but also like, what good does that do now? I mean, honestly, I'm sure some people would have rather the NFL just not say it was a mistake, but everybody identified it. Brian Baldinger did a little breakdown when it happened, and everybody's saying like there was no forcible contact. And, Harbaugh talked about it with the Travis Jones, and he said that it's just, it's the wrong call there. And if it's not forcible contact to a defenseless player, it's not whether you run into a player over trying to block a field goal. That has nothing to do with it. It's forcible contact to the head and neck area, which that was not what happened with Travis Jones. He essentially ran between the long snapper and the guard, did make contact, but, was not that unnecessary forcible contact to the head and neck. So it's just like, you need to know the rules if you're a referee. It's ridiculous that this happened. And, while again, the refs weren't the only reason why the Ravens lost this game, I want to make that clear. Still, like, they had a major impact, and that's really disappointing for, the way that this game ended up going. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll do some Ravens news, notes, and quotes. We'll analyze the Ravens and Steelers game a little more. We'll also talk about a couple of other Ravens notes that happened on Monday, as well as looking ahead a little to Cincinnati, because we already have some news on that game. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First of the show is brought to you by Mint Mobile. There's no reason to let big wireless drain your wallet, especially during the holidays. Right now, Mint Mobile's running their best deal of the year. All of their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means you can lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it the full Scrooge treatment. And what makes this even better is how simple Mint makes the switch. No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality service. Switching to Mint lets you keep your same coverage for a lower price. Setup takes only a few minutes. You can bring your own phone and number without any issues. and the service is fast and super reliable, even on the go. Turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint Unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Plan required, $15 a month equivalent. Taxes and fees, initial plan term only. Greater than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday edition of the show. Thanks so much for being here, even after a loss. I know it's tough right now. The Ravens losing, and actually, I see if you're watching in video form, the Raven in the background, he's feeling it. He's just staring off in the distance. He can't even sit up. He's feeling sad right now, as am I, and I'm sure a lot of other people as well. It's disappointed, I guess, is the word. So thanks for being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. Means a lot to me. We have such great communities creeping up on 17,000 subscribers in video form and audio form. We're growing every single day there. You can follow me on social media, KSHRK34, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole at 9 yards. Let's dive into a couple of news and notes from the Ravens and just what happened on Monday for them. So Ben Cleveland actually got suspended for 3 games after violating the league's substance of abuse policy. So I guess he'll be ineligible for the Bengals, the Patriots, and the Packers games, although was he ever going to play in those games anyway? Just a weird, again, we've talked about this, right? Weird for them to ever bring him back after, clearly not wanting to play him. He had his issue in the offseason as well. And now this is just, Ben Cleveland should not be back next season for the Ravens. There's no reason to bring him back. So Ben Cleveland going to miss the next 3 games. And the Ravens, their next game after Cincinnati, the Patriots game, is flexed. It's now going to be a Sunday night football game. So prime time. Don't go looking for the game at 1 Eastern. It will not be there. It will be 8:20 p.m. Eastern time. Where, I don't really know what the deal is. I mean, look, obviously Ravens, Patriots, the game that was flexed out, I believe, was Bengals and Dolphins. So, I mean, yeah, I think any NFL fan would rather watch Drake May versus Lamar Jackson. But, even still, I don't want the Ravens to get embarrassed on primetime. Now, the last time these two teams did play on Sunday Night Football in Baltimore was 2019. And, Lamar and this Ravens team ended up putting the work in, getting that win. But 2019 was a really long time ago. So, yeah, 2 different teams, 2 different, situations. So we're going to have to see on that. For the Bengals game, a couple of other things that, we should note here, early notes for the Ravens, as the Bengals are going to be without Trey Hendrickson, already ruled out in this game. So Hendrickson will not see the Ravens this season, which is good news for Baltimore considering that offensive line. And also T. Higgins is placed back in concussion protocol as he exhibited symptoms after the game against Buffalo. There's a really national controversy about how his, being taken out and re-entering the game was handled by the NFL. And, he hit his head twice and people thought he didn't look good, but apparently the doctor cleared him when he went back in the game. But now he's back in protocol, and that's essentially symptoms there, 2 concussions in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. That's scary. That's really scary just from a human perspective. So I hope T's okay. And I hope that they do what's best for, because, him not playing in the game from a football perspective, yeah, that benefits Baltimore, but I want T to be okay, as a human being and from a health perspective. So I don't want them to risk his health. I genuinely mean that. So we'll see what happens with T if he plays or not, but a couple notes there. And then some more about the Pittsburgh game. I mean, some of the stuff that we talked about on the watch along, instant reaction, and other stuff, the pass rush just wasn't good enough. And, John Harbaugh mentioned a couple of different things about, some of the red zone plays. And, he talked about how there were 2 missed assignments on the Jaylen Warren touchdown, that coverage, guys not covering the correct guy, which just feels very basic in my opinion. Talked about how he wasn't very pleased with how it just was weird with the 2-minute drill for them, where I was not pleased personally with how that went because they were just ticking time off the clock. And so he said in that moment where time was just ticking down, they had to flip a formation. And he had a lot of praise about DeAndre Hopkins and stuff, but they're trying to get him the ball more. And, on that play, on that 4th and 5, he didn't know if the ball was intended for Mark or DeAndre on the ball where DeAndre was wide open in the end zone and Mark ended up tipping it down. But, your defense allowed Aaron Rodgers to look like prime Aaron Rodgers, 284 when he didn't even have over 150 yards passing in either of the last 2 games. They did a great job on the ground, only 2 yards a carry. Baltimore's run defense was exceptional, but they allowed Pittsburgh on defense, like the Ravens defense, to Pittsburgh's offense, to get too many big plays. DK Metcalf went crazy. So, it's all stuff we had talked about. Baltimore went 2 for 6 in the red zone, and that drops their red zone percentage to 44.9 on the season, which is absolutely horrendous. And actually, if I look up offensive stats, the Ravens are 30th in the NFL in red zone. That is worse than only 2 teams, the Texans and the New Orleans Saints. They're in the same conversation. The Giants are better than them. The Jets are better than them. Just, it's embarrassing territory to be in. They need to be better in the red zone. They're leaving points on the board, and special teams wasn't great for them on Sunday. Just a lot of mistakes and, weird personnel decisions at times with Derrick Henry being left out on drives. So just things that they have to continue to improve on, but you only have a month. Like, how much time do you really have to improve on these things before you just kind of, they are already like huge issues. They're not just, little trends that can be fixed. No, we're 3 months into the season. So just a disappointing game all the way around. They had a shot to win it at the end. Lamar takes the sack. Lamar, he had some great throws, had some not so great throws. And, guys dropped the ball like Rashod Bateman, and Zay Flowers catches the ball out of bounds, and like all that stuff happens. But, while Lamar was better than he was in Cincinnati, that bar was still pretty low. And for the superstar expectations that Lamar Jackson has, clearly this month has not been good enough, but there is context within that in terms of the injuries he has suffered, the offensive line play and whatnot. But also Lamar also just hasn't been up to that standard, unfortunately. But he's been asked to carry this team so many times on his back, and essentially they're throwing him out there with this offensive line and saying, just be Superman every single week. And, with him taking the hits he is, it's difficult. So everybody has to be better. This team, though, 6-7, not in a good place. That's all I have for you here today, though. I'm Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show on the web. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form, and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content and coverage from us. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.